Welcome to the Deep Dive. In today's Deep Dive, we're shining a light on the invisible habits that subtly direct our lives. We'll explore how much of what we do operates on a kind of mental autopilot, and crucially, why truly understanding that automation is the essential first step to meaningful change.
Indeed. It's easy to think of our daily actions as, conscious decisions, but what the sources reveal is truly fascinating. So many of our behaviors are driven by patterns we don't even realize exist. Our brains are incredible prediction machines, constantly analyzing information. But this very efficiency, while incredibly useful, can also lead us down paths that are surprisingly, well, dangerous.
A useful danger. That sounds like a paradox. How can something so efficient also be a risk? I'm ready to unpack that.
Well, it's precisely because this automation frees up our conscious mind for more complex tasks. It makes us incredibly efficient, right?
Yeah.
Allowing us to navigate the world without constant deliberation. However, this very strength, its ability to automate, becomes its Achilles heel when those automated patterns lead us astray without our conscious knowledge.
Yeah.
We can fall into habits that no longer serve us, maybe never served us, simply because we're not actively monitoring them anymore.
So our brains are constantly taking in information, analyzing it, and picking up on cues and patterns without us even consciously thinking about it. It's like a super efficient prediction machine running in the background, making us incredibly capable. Can you give us an example of this useful side in action?
Absolutely. One powerful example from the material recounts the story of a paramedic at a family gathering. Years of working in her field had honed her intuition. The moment she saw her father-in-law, just a wave of concern washed over her.
Even though he felt fine.
Exactly. He felt perfectly fine, but she knew something was off. She insisted he go to the hospital, and within hours, he was undergoing life-saving surgery for a major artery blockage.
Wow. That's an astonishing level of intuition.
Yeah.
So if she couldn't even explain what she saw, how exactly does the brain process and store that kind of subtle, unconscious information?
The research indicates that when major arteries are obstructed, the body actually redistributes blood. It prioritizes critical organs and pulls blood away from peripheral areas, like the surface of the skin on the face.
Oh, yeah.
After years of experience seeing patients with heart failure, her brain had unknowingly developed the ability to recognize this subtle pattern of blood distribution. She couldn't articulate the specific visual cues, no, but her brain had cataloged that information and flagged it as a danger. It's a classic case of pattern recognition.
So it's about our brains automatically encoding lessons learned through repeated experience. It's like learning is always happening, even if we're not aware of it. And this kind of unconscious pattern recognition isn't limited to medical professionals, is it? I remember the sources mentioning examples across so many different fields.
Exactly. Consider military analysts who can distinguish an enemy missile from a friendly plane on radar, even if they're traveling at the same speed, same altitude, and look identical on the screen.
Right, this story about Lieutenant Commander Michael Riley.
Yes, during the first Gulf War, he saved an entire battleship because he ordered a missile shot down, even though it looked exactly like their own planes on the radar display. He made the right call, but even his superior officers couldn't explain how he did it. It was pure trained intuition.
That's a testament to the power of the non-conscious mind.
Yeah.
And it extends beyond high-stakes military decisions, too. I recall the example of museum curators.
Right. They can often discern an authentic piece of art from an expertly produced counterfeit without being able to pinpoint specific details. Or experienced radiologists who can look at a brain scan and predict the area where a stroke might develop before any obvious signs are visible to the untrained eye.
Amazing.
There are even accounts of hairdressers noticing a client's pregnancy based solely on the feel of her hair. With enough practice, enough repetition, the brain automatically encodes those lessons. You start to pick up on cues that predict certain outcomes without consciously thinking about it. That ability to notice relevant cues in a given situation is really the foundational building block for every single habit you have.
It really makes you realize how much of what we do isn't consciously directed. I mean, our bodies do so much without our conscious input already. Our hair grows, our heart pumps, our lungs breathe, our stomach digests. We're so much more than just our conscious selves. If our brain is doing all this learning and encoding behind the scenes, does that imply we have less free will than we think? Are choices truly ours if so much is driven unconsciously?
That's a profound question, and it really gets to the heart of this deep dive, doesn't it? The sources suggest that while we absolutely have the capacity for conscious choice, a vast amount of our daily behavior is operating on these automatic programs. Think about hunger, for example. You don't necessarily have to see a cookie on the counter to realize it's time to eat. Appetite and cravings are largely governed non-consciously. Your body has a variety of feedback loops, hormones, chemicals circulating that gradually alert you when it's time to eat again. Suddenly you just feel hungry, even though you're not quite sure what specific cue tipped you off.
So we've established this incredible efficiency of the brain, this useful autopilot. But I imagine there must be a flip side, right? What are the potential pitfalls or dangers we need to be aware of?
That's the surprising insight, really. You don't actually need to be aware of the cue for a habit to begin. Actions can fall entirely under the direction of your automatic non-conscious mind. This is precisely what makes habits incredibly useful for efficiency, naturally, but it's also what makes them dangerous. As habits form, you can find yourself falling into old patterns before you even realize what's happening, sometimes, to your detriment.
That makes sense. But isn't there a risk that by constantly trying to point and call every tiny habit, we might become overly self-conscious, maybe lose some of that natural spontaneity? Where's the line between helpful awareness and potentially paralyzing overanalysis?
That's a fair question, and it highlights a crucial point. The goal isn't to micromanage every single action, absolutely not. It's more about gaining control over the habits that genuinely impact our long-term goals and well-being. It's about empowering choice where it matters most. And the issue isn't just a loss of spontaneity, it's often a loss of control over patterns that no longer serve us or maybe even harm us. The sources share some vivid anecdotes that really drive this home. There's the retail clerk, right?
Oh, yeah?
She was instructed to cut up empty gift cards after customers use them. Standard procedure. One day, after processing several gift cards in a row, the next customer walked up, and the clerk, entirely on autopilot, swiped the customer's actual credit card,
Oh,
picked up the scissors, and cut it right in half before looking up at the stunned customer and realizing what she'd just done.
oh my gosh, I could just picture that customer's face. That's a nightmare. It makes me wonder, have you ever had a moment where your own autopilot took over in a bizarre or embarrassing way?
I once tried to swipe my physical library card on a digital payment terminal after a long day of just using my phone for everything. My brain was just on autopilot for transactions. Thankfully, it didn't cut it in half. But it perfectly illustrates how deeply ingrained these routines become.
Totally.
Or consider the former preschool teacher who switched to a corporate job but kept asking her coworkers if they had washed their hands after going to the bathroom.
Uh-huh.
Or the lifeguard who, even after changing professions, would occasionally yell, "Walk!" whenever he saw a child running, just anywhere.
Yeah.
These are deeply ingrained automatic responses.
So it's not just the explicit actions, but also the cues themselves that become invisible over time. The cues that spark our habits become so common, they are essentially part of the background noise. Think about it. The treats on the kitchen counter, the remote control next to the couch, the phone always in our pocket. Our responses to these cues become so deeply encoded that the urge to act might feel like it comes from nowhere.
Exactly. And this is precisely why we must begin the process of behavior change with awareness. If a habit remains mindless, you can't expect to improve it. As the psychologist Carl Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate."
Wow.
That's a powerful statement that really captures the essence of what we're talking about here.
So, okay, what does this all mean for us then? If awareness is the absolute key to breaking free from these invisible patterns, how do we actually cultivate it? How do we bring the unconscious to the conscious, especially when so much of it feels, well, unconscious?
One fascinating answer comes from the Japanese railway system. It's widely regarded as one of the safest and most efficient in the world. If you ever ride a train in Tokyo, you'll notice the conductors have this peculiar habit known as pointing and calling.
Pointing and calling.
Yeah. As each operator runs the train, they go through this ritual of pointing at different objects and calling out commands aloud. So when the train approaches a signal, the operator will point at it and say, "Signal is green." As the train pulls into and out of each station, they point at the speedometer and call out the exact speed. When it's time to leave, they point at the timetable and state the time.
That sounds incredibly meticulous, and it's not just the operators doing this, is it? I remember reading that platform staff do something similar.
That's right. Out on the platform, other employees perform similar actions. Before each train departs, staff members will point along the edge of the platform and declare, "All clear." Every single detail is identified, pointed at, and named aloud.
It sounds almost quirky, doesn't it? Like a kind of theatrical performance. But the data shows it's remarkably effective. This seemingly simple process reduces errors by up to 85% and cuts accidents by a staggering 30%.
Huge numbers.
Yeah. And New York City's MTA subway system even adopted a modified point-only version.
Yeah.
And within 2 years, incidents of incorrectly berthed subways fell by 57%. That's a massive impact from something so basic it almost seems too good to be true.
You've hit on the core concept. The reason it's so effective is that it elevates the level of awareness from a non-conscious habit to a more conscious level. Because the train operators must use their eyes, hands, mouth, and ears, they are far more likely to notice problems before something goes wrong. They're engaging multiple senses to force conscious attention onto these otherwise routine actions. It basically bypasses the autopilot.
I know someone who does something similar, actually. My wife, whenever we're preparing to walk out the door for a trip, she'll verbally call out the most essential items in her packing list, almost like a little chant. I've got my keys, I've got my wallet, I've got my glasses, I've got my husband. It's her personal point and call for leaving the house. And you know what? It works.
It's a perfect everyday example of how this principle can be applied. The more automatic a behavior becomes, the less likely we are to consciously think about it. When we've done something 1,000 times before, we start to overlook things. We just assume that the next time will be exactly like the last.
Right.
We're so used to doing what we've always done that we don't stop to question whether it's the right thing to do at all. Many of our failures in performance are largely attributable to a lack of self-awareness. We really do need a personal point-and-call system for our own lives.
Okay, so beyond pointing and calling in the moment, the material we examine points to another simple yet powerful exercise to build awareness: the habit scorecard. Can you walk us through what it is and how we, our listener, can maybe start using it right now?
Yeah, the habit scorecard is a very straightforward way to become more aware of your daily behaviors. First, you just make a comprehensive list of all your daily habits from the moment you wake up until you go to bed.
So you literally just list everything you do.
Yeah.
Even things like brushing teeth or turning off an alarm.
Exactly. Everything, no matter how small it seems. So that might start with wake up, turn off alarm, check my phone, go to the bathroom, weigh myself, take a shower, brush my teeth, floss my teeth, put on deodorant, hang up towel to dry, get dressed, make a cup of tea, and so on through your whole day.
Got it.
Once you have that full list, you go through each behavior and ask yourself, is this a good habit, a bad habit, or a neutral habit? If it's good, you write a plus sign, plus. If it's bad, a minus sign. And if it's neutral, an equals sign. So check my phone, first thing might be a plus sign. Weigh myself could be a plus sign, and hang up towel to dry might be in.
Now, I can imagine some people might struggle with what constitutes good or bad.
Yeah.
A habit might seem good in one context, but bad in another, right?
Mhm.
The sources clarify this, saying there are no inherently good habits or bad habits, only effective habits, effective at solving problems.
Yeah.
All habits serve you in some way, even the seemingly bad ones. Like, for example, smoking a cigarette might reduce stress in the moment, serving a purpose for you right then.
But how do we decide which mark to give it on the scorecard? That's a crucial distinction. For this exercise, the idea is to categorize your habits by how they will benefit you in the long run. Generally speaking, good habits will have net positive outcomes over time, and bad habits will have net negative outcomes. If you're still having trouble deciding, a great guiding question is, does this behavior help me become the type of person I wish to be? Does this habit cast a vote for or against my desired identity?
Ah, okay, connecting it to identity.
Exactly. Habits that reinforce your desired identity are usually good, and those that conflict with it are usually bad long term.
And the most important thing, especially when you're first creating your habits scorecard, is simply to notice what's actually happening without judgment or criticism. Don't blame yourself for your faults or, praise yourself excessively for your successes. You're just observing your thoughts and actions as if you were watching someone else.
Precisely.
So if you eat a chocolate bar every morning, just acknowledge it, write it down. If you binge eat, simply notice that you are eating more calories than you intended. If you waste time online, notice that you are spending your life in a way that you perhaps do not want to. No judgment, just pure awareness.
That's the very first step, and it's foundational. The process of behavior change always starts with awareness. You need to be on the lookout for your habits, good and bad, before you can even begin to consciously change them.
So once we've gained this awareness, say through the scorecard, how can we use a tool like pointing and calling for immediate action in our personal lives? Let's take confronting a junk food habit, for example.
You can literally say out loud the action you're about to take and what the outcome will likely be. So if you notice yourself reaching for another cookie when you're trying to cut back on junk food, you can actually say aloud, I'm about to eat this cookie, but I don't need it. Eating it will cause me to gain weight and hurt my health.
Yeah.
It brings that unconscious urge or decision right into conscious thought, forces you to confront it.
That sounds simple, but I can see how powerful that would be. Hearing your bad habits spoken aloud must make the consequences seem more real, more tangible. It adds weight to the action, rather than just letting yourself mindlessly slip into an old routine. It creates that crucial pause, right? A moment of choice.
Precisely. And this approach is even useful if you're just trying to remember a task on your to-do list. Just saying out loud, tomorrow I need to go to the post office after lunch, increases the odds that you'll actually do it.
Really.
Just saying it.
Yeah, you're getting yourself to acknowledge the need for action verbally, and that simple act can make all the difference in follow-through. So the core message here, weaving through all these examples and tools, is that the process of behavior change always starts with awareness. It's the foundational shift. Without it, nothing else really works.
Absolutely. Strategies like pointing and calling and the habit scorecard are focused entirely on getting you to recognize your habits and acknowledge the cues that trigger them, which ultimately makes it possible to respond in ways that truly benefit you, rather than just reacting on autopilot. Without that initial awareness, you're constantly fighting against an invisible current.
What a deep dive this has been. We've seen how our brains are incredibly adept at pattern recognition, operating on an autopilot that's both a blessing for efficiency and a potential trap for our long-term goals. We learned that once our habits become automatic, we often stop paying attention, and that the path to meaningful change absolutely begins with awareness, seeing what's really going on.
What's truly fascinating here is how much of our lives are directed by forces we don't consciously see. It's quite profound, really. But with simple, practical tools like pointing and calling and the habit scorecard, we can start to shine a light on those invisible drivers and begin to exert true control over our choices, moving from autopilot to, well, intention.
So as you go about your day, think about this. How might truly seeing your invisible habits change, not just your actions, but maybe your very sense of self and destiny? What one habit will you point and call first today, simply to become more aware? We definitely encourage you to try the habit scorecard and see what hidden patterns emerge for you. It could be quite revealing.